Welcome to the story of Frugal Racing and the 2017 TrackDay Championship, with all of its supporters helping along the way and the whole thing getting underway at Donington Park. But it wasn't the ideal start to the season. Let's start with the first flying lap of the year, though, a qualifying lap from Ben. And Ben, start of the season, what was the mood going into this first qualifying lap, which of course ultimately didn't quite work out as you'd hoped?
We'd had a few issues getting to this point, and we were happy to be out on the track. However, as you're now about to see, very, very quickly we lost power, and we had to start sussing out what was going on from there. It was extraordinarily frustrating, as we'd put so much effort in just to get to this point, but we had to solve a lot more problems to get any further.
So, Callum, it was a bit of a panic to get ready for the race.
It was quite fun, to be honest. We didn't really realise until very late in the session that we had a flat battery and that we had to charge it. So we were really just hoping we would get as far as we could. But it was great fun starting from 23rd. We didn't get a qualifying lap in at all, really. So this was fun.
Round the outside, through Redgate, through Old Hairpin, up the hill. You were really picking them off. How many places did you actually make on lap 1?
10.
Wow. And how long before you started feeling some sort of problem with the car again?
Well, I have to say I didn't feel a problem with the car in my stint. I did the first 22 minutes of the race and it all kind of worked like clockwork. Unfortunately, I kind of thought at one point that we might actually get to the end, but I got a bit stuck behind these two. They were just too fast in a straight line and pitted from behind them to give it to Ben, and Ben had the problem, unfortunately.
So at this point in the race, obviously the car was running okay. You came in from 10th place, so you'd made up all those positions. But Ben, once you'd gone back out, that didn't really last too much longer, did it?
No, I mean we hadn't had a huge amount of time with the car full stop, hence my little excursion across there. And then we were just starting to get settled into it, and then I felt it bog a couple of times, and I was a little bit confused. It then came back again. It seemed to be when I revved through that it would work. I wondered if it was a misfire or something, but as it turned out, we'd run out of electricity. And as you can see, the hundreds of hours I've spent in the garage, the frustration coming out there at that point, it was a low point of the season for sure.
Well, if you're going to have a low point, it's good to have them at the beginning of the year, I guess. So it meant absolutely no points scored whatsoever. 0 points after the first round of the championship. And it was on to round 2, the local race, one of 2 local races at Snetterton during the season, and straight into qualifying once again. And Ben, you really put together a bit of a mega lap this time.
Snetterton's my local circuit. I love it, and at this point we had now gotten comfortable with the car. It felt like an extension of myself rather than being a passenger, and felt like we could really get on it, and we needed to here because the 200 is not our track. We make up a lot of time in the corners, but there are not too many of them, so it's a lot of sitting duck scenarios on the straights. But no, the quali lap all came together and just happened to be what we needed to get the results. So we were very happy with this one.
Where do you reckon you made up most of the time on this qualifying lap?
I would say Coram. Later on you'll see some of the closing speeds that we were able to carry through Coram. I think at points we're 20 mile an hour quicker than everything else. So yeah, any time we're at a direction change, from about this point onwards, I'd say we're probably making up about 2.5-3 seconds a lap on this point alone. We've just got nothing on it everywhere else, but at this point it comes alive, and we can do things because we've got no weight. We can do things that others just can't, and so you can change direction so fast.
So this was the qualifying lap. This put you guys well up on the grid, and thankfully no problems, no technical problems this time, and the car was ready to go. So an excellent position, 8th place on the grid for this, and then it was all time to take the start. And Ben, you took the start this time, and of course the rear-wheel drive Caterham usually pretty quick off the line.
Yeah, it digs in really well. It's not particularly complicated. It's easy to over rev, and once it spins up you have lost everything, but if you can get it to bite, it's very straightforward and makes everything else look stupid until the point where you're in about 3rd gear and everything else envelops you around you, as has happened here, and then it's trying to fight your way through a bunch of saloon cars that you can't see around. And you'll see the Seat, and we're now about to get up the inside of here, is Mike, and we have a tremendous battle with him throughout this race, where he has huge advantage in certain areas and we have huge advantages in certain areas, and it ends up being very, very close.
Callum, you were obviously sitting in the pits watching, or standing in the pits watching all this first stint unfold, and this race really did hot up nicely between them, didn't it?
Oh, it did. It's great, and it's brilliant to race with Mike. And he's a good friend of ours and very spatially aware. He's obviously raced against Caterham's before now and commented at the start of the season about the visibility part of it. So it was nice for us to be able to race with Mike, knowing that he's likely to be aware of where we are, and he gave us lots of space, and it was just great fun. And watching this, the Caterham being such a different car to the Seat, just driving right round the outside of him and shutting the door, and I know he had every bit as much fun as we had in this race.
All part and parcel of the TrackDay Championship, of course, where you guys are racing against such different types of car. But you guys were running in Class A this year. You were competing against some Class S cars. In this early part of the season, the Class S car certainly had the edge, but later on in the year, things would change around a bit.
Yeah, no, they did. I mean, we made a number of modifications to the car over the course of the season, which just got it more and more on pace. It was great. To be honest, the first 3 races of the season really weren't suitable to us. I mean, you can see here it's just an abundance of long straights, and everything just disappears away from you halfway down them. But as we got later in the season, we had Brands GP, we had Rockingham, which is where it really came alive for us with the tight infield, and closed the season out at Alton Park, so a lot more competitive.
This battle with Mike was really going well at this point.
It was fantastic fun, and it was where I found my feet with the car. I figured out what it could do, how to manoeuvre, where its strengths and weaknesses were. It was the first time I really felt like the thing came alive. In fact, I remember looking at the pit wall, and as we were closing people down and taking more and more places, some encouraging gestures were being made, and I felt on it for the first time in the car. And this sort of set the tone for the season at this point after the massive disappointment of the first round. It was a sudden feeling of, oh wow, we can actually do something good here. And as you see, it's a little frustrating, because every time you do it, it gets undone for you. But it was a case of stick with it, and this really helped me learn what the car could do.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic race you had in this one, and it's always great fun to dice like this with a car that's so evenly matched as well, where you've got these pros and cons, different parts of the track, and then you've got back markers to deal with as well, and that is always a factor as well, trying to time the move against back markers. The MR2 was going quite well at this stage as well. Of course, having jumped out of an MR2 last year, Callum, you knew what it was like.
I did know what it was like, and I have to say he's a very, very impressive driver, because they are horrible cars to drive on the limit. But he did sneak a turbo into it this year. Helped him a bit further up. This was crucial. I mean, here Mike's just developing an engine problem, unfortunately for him, as he had actually pulled away from us a little bit before I came back out for my stint. But he never finished the race, sadly, from that point onwards. And this is me getting enveloped by Simon. The first time we really came into contact with Simon on the circuit, and this would be the battle that would carry on for the remainder of the season. Here, unfortunately, he qualified second, couldn't take the race start because of a clutch failure or a launch failure, started from the pit lane and still got past me, and there was nothing I could do about this.
So Simon Clark at the Porsche, your nemesis really for what would be the rest of the year.
Absolutely, but a very fun one and fair.
That's important. So the racing was good and clean. How nervous were you at this point, Ben, that the car was going to hold together?
Yeah, I had everything crossed on the pit wall. A lot of this year has been sitting on the pit wall hoping the thing's going to come around just one more lap. Because of the problems we've had, I still had no faith in the thing at this point. But it was great to see it be competitive. Unfortunately, we saw on the timings that Simon was going to catch us and pass us. But Callum did a very good job at keeping it at bay for as long as possible. And it did set the tone for things to come, and it only got better from here.
So first race finish of the season, and an excellent 6th place in the end, 3rd in Class A, in a race that was won by Darren Goes. So Darren Goes had started off the season in pretty good style, having won both of the opening encounters, but Frugal Racing were now in the mix. On to Silverstone in June then, and another glorious sunny day, and time to put in another fast lap. Callum, it went pretty well on the national circuit.
Oh, I couldn't have been any more lucky if I'd prayed for it. We managed to get a toe down every single straight and managed to maintain as much speed as I could, diving past everybody on the way into each corner. Yeah, no, this was great. I mean, this is one of the most satisfying laps that I put in over the course of the season. But it was just blind luck, if we're being completely honest.
But it was good enough. It was going to be good enough for 5th place. We'll see the rest of the lap. This was crucial, wasn't it? When you came out of the hairpin and down the Wellington straight, you got a nice little toe here.
Oh yes, well, my old friend with the MR2. Fortunately, he's a little bit quicker than we are in a straight line, and the MR2 was always so slippery at the end of the straight, so he had great end of straight speed. And we had just pulled out just before he got on the brakes. The last thing I wanted to do was go into the back of him, and just pinched the front left just a tiny bit there. Was desperate. I was convinced that my lap would now be ruined by the Ginetta, who fortunately took himself wide and left a small gap for us to slide through up the inside, and then got a distant toe from the clear in front of us down the rest of the straight. And yeah, that was a nice one.
Excellent. So 5th overall, 2nd in class, and then raring to go for the start of the race as well. Darren Gose was starting on pole position, but it nearly went wrong for you before the race even started.
Yeah, I took some inspiration from Bottas on that one. This was just after the Chinese Grand Prix, and I think he did the same thing in the safety car restart. So,
thankfully, the actual start went slightly better.
It did, although I have to say it was a terrible launch. It was far too much wheel spin, and I didn't get that great first bite off the line that the Caterham's so good at. So I quickly fell back into the reaches of these guys, and once again a great battle coming up with Mike.
So the car was working well on the national circuit, but of course it's got some fairly decent straights on it. This was a car you were racing against here that didn't turn up right at the beginning of the season, the Honda, did it?
Well, actually, it turned up at Donington, so we did pass it at Donington. It didn't come to Snetterton, so far as I noticed, and we didn't see it again, I don't believe, for the remainder of the season.
I think the guy's name is Luke. I believe he does a Honda Championship, and he's obviously committed to that. But no, when he's turned up, he's always been fairly quick.
And once again, this was getting nice and tight with Mike, who always seems to know exactly where you are.
Fortunately.
So, talk us through this part of the stint, the Fiesta as well. That became one of your major contenders, didn't it?
Well, I mean, Kester, very good driver, seriously impressive car. You'll never see a Fiesta go faster. He actually didn't complete the rest of the season. In fact, I think this was his last race. He's been putting together some pretty serious modifications for his car for next season, so you know he's going to be competitive. That Fiesta was seriously fast. But we were right on terms with him here. As you'll see later in the stint, Ben spent the best part of 20 minutes right up his gearbox. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to playing with him next year.
Tell us about the handling of the car at this point in the season. Was it exactly where you wanted it to be?
No, I have to say we were struggling here with oversteer. We tried to correct it from qualifying to make it less oversteery, but to be honest, I didn't notice much of a difference with the modifications that we made. It's all about carrying speed. I think mainly we were probably just both overdrive. I certainly was probably just overdriving it.
Bit of a lunge there. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was fun. Again, if it was anybody else, I know I'd have had the whole car missing. But no, Mike, very fair as usual. I had to do something to try and get past him, but it was never enough. That thing was so much faster on the straights. You're going to watch him just come straight back at us. But we were quicker over a lap.
Now, at this point in the season, I mean, you were really fighting for class victories. That was what your big target was, wasn't it?
It was, yes, and Mike's very much in that class. I mean, at the moment, it was between us, Mike, and the black Citroen Saxo, which is not here. Actually, neither the black Citroen Saxo or Simon Clark turned up for this race, and actually that proved crucial for us in our championship bid later in the season.
But Mike was battling hard, as ever, in the Seat. Ben, the car didn't cause any problems at this stage of the season. You've done a lot of hard work to get it prepared right. Were you happy generally with the way it was at Silverstone?
Yeah, it was great. We started to push a little harder and figure out things like when the tyres go off. There was a point we noticed that we made the rear tyres too hot and it would be absolutely undrivable for a couple of laps. You had to calm it all down and bring it back to you, and then it would work again. And
let's just see this bit. This was a bit of a recovery from Callum, wasn't it?
Yeah, he did rather well to not put it in the back of the Seat. We weren't particularly happy with that manoeuvre. In fact, this race was a little bit controversial. I think because we were finding our feet and establishing ourselves as a competitive car, because we'd missed the first round technically, people didn't realise that we were either on the same lap as them or all going to be there at all. So we surprised a few people, and it could have ended a lot worse, but fortunately with some quick reactions remained in one piece.
Good stuff. The Seat actually ending up dropping back in the end, so no further problems. But yeah, Callum, that was a great recovery earlier on, and it was a great first stint all round, really, wasn't it?
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I really didn't want to fall behind Mike because, as you just saw there was a 5-minute window there where I was miles behind him, and we did reel him back in. But because I dropped in behind him, it certainly left us vulnerable, and the chap there in the Seat was a bit of a liability. But this was great. This is Ben just coming out of the pit lane right into the path of Kester, and the pair of them battling for 4th position at this point. And as Ben referred to earlier, I don't think Kester knew that we were on the same lap. This was a good little moment.
This was great stuff, and in fact, by now you were battling for podium positions by this point, weren't you?
Yeah, I hadn't realised, to be honest. I just jumped out, and the first thing I had was, somebody there to deal with. Knew I was going to have problems down the straight, so I tried to tag onto the Golf we've just seen go past, which moved Kester over into the middle of the track, and Kester over to the other side of the track. And at that point, I thought, right, well, if I can keep with him and just go with him, then we'll at least get some sort of decent result. Again, not realising exactly where we were at the time, but it just got better and better. Managed to maintain decent pace the whole session, and you see I'm very happy there at the end with I believe that was class victory, wasn't it?
It was indeed.
First of the season.
First class win and a great celebration, and adding up the points tally as well. So that really was a significant achievement. First overall podium, first ever class win, and went on to the next stage at Rockingham.
Yeah, well, this for us is where we really came alive. So, I mean, that was a blinding result at Silverstone, and not something that we ever thought we'd achieve. Here, we thought we'd be a bit closer. I don't think we appreciated how close this would actually put us into the mix. I love Rockingham, I have to say. I know a lot of racing drivers on the English season don't like it, but I think it's probably my favourite, or at least one of my very, very favourite circuits, just for the amount of contrast there is. And it's cemented even more so now by the fact that we took our first ever overall race win here.
Yeah, so we'll be building up to that. But this was qualifying, and this was a very important lap as well, because it got you guys right up at the front.
It did, and actually this is before we were able to put our larger 8-inch rear wheels on the back of the car. So we still had a serious lack of rear traction, but if anything, you could say that it helped us change direction quite quickly. But it was certainly, Ben certainly seems to think that it was as much of a second as a bolt-on item, and I could well believe it. But this got us into second place overall. We were just pit by Darren at the end of the second stint, with more rubber down. But yeah, this was great. Love it.
Yeah, and we'll see plenty more of Darren once we get into the race itself. But a great lap. You can see you're absolutely on the limit just about everywhere. Very important, of course, to get a good exit from this one. Yeah,
the chicane is so difficult. Just trying to get traction out onto the banking through here, because all the back end wants to do is disappear from you. You've got to keep it straight and let it run all the way up to the banking just to get the straight line, just to get the drive down the start-finish straight, which is very long here, so we were very vulnerable.
So that meant a front row start. How did that feel, Ben? Was that a bit nerve-wracking?
It was my first front row start from, I think, since I was 12 years old, so it was quite interesting. We had done so much to the car at this point. This whole weekend was car issues and car modification, so we didn't know what we were driving at this point. And going to the first corner, it was extraordinarily exciting to know what you'd got underneath you. You can see I got enveloped again by the bigger cars, but as soon as I turned in, I realised we'd made the right choice with our tyre and wheel setup, and it was really, really worth the heartache and agony and rushing about to try and get the anti-roll bars to not hit into the wheel itself. So we were very concerned that was going to be a problem through the race, but fortunately we'd fixed it at this point. And later in the race, it benefited us so much. We could continue to keep the grip in the whole time.
Rockingham really shows up the differences, doesn't it, between the sort of saloon cars and your car. They've got that straight line speed, but you keep coming back at them in the twiddly section on the inside. It makes for some fascinating racing.
Yeah, we can just do stuff that they can't, and the change of direction, I think that's the biggest thing. We can just throw the thing about, not have to wait for the weight to transfer, and just get straight back on it. And I did say to Darren, well, all three of us, as you can see us here, we all had a chat beforehand, and they lowered their mirrors for me. And I said, I'm not going to weave, I'm not going to make the straights difficult for you. If you're coming past, you're coming past. I said, when it's happening, it's going to happen mid-corner, probably on the outside, and I think you'll see in a few minutes that is what happens. So they were aware of the situation.
Absolutely. Well, it was a good battle, and it goes, and it certainly starts now, but there's a lot more of it, because you got to watch out from behind all the time as well. You've still got the quick BMWs around too.
Yeah, I was very worried about the Beamer. I thought if I got behind them, I didn't know who was in the car at this point, but they're both very good drivers, and I think they could have held us behind. And because of the extra speed they've got, I think, to be honest, in a straight line, it's the quickest car out there. I don't think we'd got back past, and I thought that was absolutely essential, that we needed to keep them behind. And that was really the awakening that I needed to go after Simon. I thought if I don't go after him, then we're going to get taken by the Beamer. So it was essential to keep them behind.
And is there a special satisfaction when you're up against something like a Porsche Boxster and you know how much they cost to buy and run, and then you're managing to go past him?
Yeah, I think that's one of the best bits, to be honest with you, Ben. Yeah, it's a fantastic achievement for our 20-year-old something, 1 point something Caterham to be messing about with these boys. It's no disrespect to them. The car can do some incredible things, but yeah, there is a set of satisfaction of our very low budget, and I think this was the first time we'd put tyres on since the beginning of the season, because we had to have different sizes. So yeah, it's great to be able to just do that. Brilliant.
Lovely move down the inside into the left-hander. And then, of course, you've always got that problem that they try and come back to you before you get into the hairpin at the end of the long run round the banking. But this time, you managed to fend him off, and that was absolutely crucial. It allowed you into second place overall and chasing after the man who'd had so much success in the early part of the year. Didn't get a finish at Silverstone, but Darren Goes, really the man to beat throughout the season, Callum.
Yes, with Darren, lovely chap. He's got the budget to run it. The car that you're seeing on the right-hand side of shot just now is a TCR touring car, which he purchased and brought into the season. It's right up there at the top of what's allowed, which means it's the car to beat. And it's great having such a nice guy driving something that's so formidable that we can pit ourselves against all season long. And as you can see here, Ben straight round the outside of him.
Yeah, lovely move around the outside. He nearly caught you out on the brakes, and he has to brake so much earlier than you.
Yeah, and I think he knew that. I believe that there were some tactics going on there. Darren is a very tactical driver. In fact, he really seems to work the situations out well. He worked out that if he stopped me on the apex, there was nothing I could do, and so that's what he tried to do. And although I had told him about the outside thing, I think he thought I was joking at the time. And so we had a great ding-dong battle where he was, stopping me in the middle of the corner so I couldn't flow the speed through, and then getting away on the straight. And this went on and on for quite some time. And you see Simon gets a little bit interested again, because it did slow us up in general. But I was just waiting for that moment, for him to just not get it quite right. And I worked out from about 6 or 7 laps of following him that if I hadn't got him before going to the corner, if I hadn't got him like 2 or 3 corners in, I wasn't going to have enough time to gap him for the rest of the lap to make the straight stick. So it was I tried a few things, and I kept trying things, and eventually it sort of paid off.
Started to come together. How was the mood in the pits at this point, Callum? Because you guys were there, you were right up there, you were fighting for race victory. It must have been quite nerve-wracking knowing you were going to be in the car any moment.
Oh yeah. I remember just I was beside myself on the pit wall. Every time they came round, I was just craning my neck round the pit wall, trying to see which one was going to come round first. And the first time Ben came through in front of Darren, I think we all just went mad. I think we almost dropped. Actually, I think we did. We dropped one of the numbers of the pit board over the side of the wall. I couldn't wait to get my teeth into this. But no, it was brilliant. It's clear that we had the pace. It's just trying to find a way past it, as Ben said, to make it stick.
Yeah, and it was this area of the track where you really managed to find some time, Ben. Again, here you've got another great shot at it, and he's doing his best all the time, isn't he, to just sort of use up all of your road. But ultimately, the Caterham doesn't need too much width to nip by.
No, you can change what you're doing in mid-corner. So if I want to change my line, I can. It was really fortunate, actually. I found a downloadable version of this track. It's not actually on any games at all, and I used games to practice on. I'd never been here before, and fortunately the infield section was quite realistic, and to learn the flow between the 3 or 4 corners that you've got to link together was pretty crucial, because it turned out that was the place where we were making it all of the time.
but then he was able to keep getting you back just before the hairpin, wasn't he? And that was the sort of frustrating thing in a way. You just couldn't quite stay in front there.
Yeah, it was. Although with this particular time, I'd scared him a little bit, and he stayed defensive, which then screws him up for the next bit. And that was what I'd been waiting for this whole time. I was waiting to get him offline, so he was very much more offline into this one. Now I can stay on the outside and close him off from trying to take that. And there we go. He's not. I've maintained my speed. He's come offline to try and block me, and that's the point where I knew I'd be able to do it. So I think literally one lap later, though, I came into the pits to give it over to Callum.
Great first stint, and then it was all up to you, Callum. So amazingly, you came out with them again, didn't you?
Oh, this was ridiculous. Just to come out at that point, exactly, to completely split them after all this time. At this point, we're 23, 24 minutes into the race, and we're still all just nose to tail, and I had to do exactly what Ben had spent lap after lap doing. And the only difference is at this point, I'm at the moment driving a car that I've not driven before, because we've now got 2-inch, we've got 4 inches of additional rubber on the back of it.
Yeah, so that was a definite challenge as well. So you're trying to get used to the car, slotting in between. Just shows you great pit stops from all three, actually, because they all ended up virtually the same.
Oh, they were. They were actually. We went back and checked them all, and they were all within about half a second of each other. So, fortunately, they actually did a printout this time of how long everybody's pit stops were. So, no, it was great. This is brilliant.
So you said how much you enjoyed the Rockingham circuit. How confident were you feeling at this point that you could really do something?
Oh, I'm holding back so much here. I knew within 3 corners that I had so much more pace than Darren. I was even wildly had a look at going all the way around the outside of him here at Tarzan, but it was a little bit too much to ask for apparently. But yeah, there's so much grip. And again, as Ben said earlier on, the tyres go off. They're not really designed for these big cars to go for so long. And because we're so light, our tyres were fine, and they were suffering with more and more understeer and traction out of slow corners. So you'll probably see here, you can just pull up alongside him out of a slow corner. It was a matter of time, I think, as much as anything else.
Yeah, of course, once they get the tyres delivered the power, they've still got that extra power in a straight line to stay ahead of you. But you were so perfectly placed, even with Simon right behind you. He had a little look now and then, but he never really had another chance, did he?
Well, no, and to be honest, I'm surprised. I mean, I thought there that he would actually have just bombed around. I mean, if you look at the gap that Darren's now got, he was long gone, and it's almost like Simon said, you know what, if I get back past you again, I'm only going to hold you up, and I'm going to have to defend loads. I'll settle for third and let you go and fight for fight with Darren, and that was very good of him.
Maybe he was hoping that you two would be so busy fighting each other that it let him through on the inside.
Well, possibly, but this is where I got it done. Darren went a little bit wide. I tucked straight up past the inside of him. Good traction out of the corner, and then just pulled the gap as much as I could. It was still seriously close by the time we came back to the end of the straight, though.
Yeah, this is where you knew, like Ben had done earlier, this was the right place to get past him, wasn't it? Because you still had plenty of the infield to gain that advantage and build it up. Here you are then, and a back marker, maybe just giving you a bit of a help.
Oh, well, he didn't want to let me past him. I had a huge lock-up just trying to get past him, because, of course, at the end of the straight, we're not much faster than the little 172 Clio. So this was desperate. I've got to get past him under braking. And then, again, he didn't seem to want to let Darren past either. So we got onto the twisty infield with a back marker between us who was much slower. And I think this gave me a 3 or 4 second gap by the time we came out of the infield, by which point we were away.
Fantastic. So it was just stroking it home after that. Well, lap after lap, just keeping it sensible, keeping it smooth, and then coming across the line for your first outright win. First time this season that a Class A car had won outright as well. It really was a huge achievement, wasn't it? It
was a wonderful moment. Best moment of the season.
So the highlight of the year, and it also put you right there in the championship as well. So next up, it was on to Snetterton, the 300 this time, and qualifying once again over to you, Ben, because it was another good lap.
I had big hopes for this race, home event on the 300, so I hoped to come away with a good result. Probably put a little bit too much pressure on myself, to be honest. But yeah, had a good qualifying showing. Not too bad at all. We didn't have quite the advantage on the infield that we expected, and we were suffering a little bit after lucking into the setup with Rockingham. We found it a little bit tricky to dial the car in for this track. But yeah, had a great time, and just trying to hit all my marks and be sensible with it. Like I say, if I'd have been a little bit more relaxed, I think I'd have been able to get into it a bit more, get in the zone a little bit better. But I had got a lot of expectations for this particular weekend.
We only had 3 laps at this point, remember? So quite. It did. So literally the top us, Darren and Simon all went out of the first 3 cars on the circuit, and we were the only people to get 3 dry laps in before it rained, and this was Ben's 3rd lap. So really, it could have been anything. Literally 1 lap after Ben had set this lap, the circuit was so treacherous, as you'll see when we get to the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for reminding me about that, Callum. I did forget this was one of the scariest moments of the season, in fact. After I set the qualifying lap, I then tried to go faster, thinking that the streaming off my visor was more of a visual than it actually was. But no, it turns out it was very, very wet, and turn 1 I had a straight on, very, very scary moment, and was happy to not put the car in the wall. But it was very much an awakening of how different it was going to be in the wet.
Still, but good planning for you guys to get out there first. I mean, it's so important sometimes, especially when the weather's a bit dodgy for qualifying. You've got to be one of the first cars out on track to take advantage of any decent conditions that you may have. So this was towards the end of the flying lap, then coming through Coram Corner, and then hard on the brakes down into Murray's, and you can really see how the car's working well, chucking it in, but the car's more stable now. You can even see it, that the back end is stepping out less than it was in the early part of the year when you had the narrower tyres on. But 3rd place, fantastic starting position, but then the change in weather conditions, and let's just see what happened a moment or 2 later, going up towards that first corner after a little bit more rain had come in, and off onto the grass, into the gravel trap. Oh my goodness, that must have felt a bit scary.
I was hoping and praying to hit the gravel trap. At the point where I was on the grass, I was like, I'm going way too fast. This is going to be big. And fortunately, managed to steer it towards the gravel, and things became a little bit calmer from there, and managed to just sneak away without any damage.
Callum turning right before he even started the race here, and just about finding enough room by the wall to go past. That was a little bit hairy there, Callum.
Oh, that was great fun. I decided, but Darren totally cheated. He was parked out of position on his grid box. I was supposed to be able to go left and follow the Porsche, and he parked right in front of me. So I said, well, if you're going to do that, I'm going to go right. And I did. And
it worked, didn't it? And you were right up there in the battle again on the early laps with Darren in particular here, right behind you, trying to get that place back.
Oh yeah, I mean, this was a losing battle. I don't think I was under any doubt that Darren was going to come tonking past me at some point. I just tried to hold him off for as long as I possibly could, but I think this was the last corner I managed to keep him behind me for. But still, a good start.
Did you find that when you were fighting up front, like you were here at Stetson, now you were regular front runners, having won at Rockingham, did you find that it was almost easier driving against these guys than it was when you were a bit more back in the pack?
Oh, for sure. I mean, these guys were very, very good drivers, very sensible. They're in control of their car. They're aware of us. And if anything, I think there was a bit more respect for us up and down the field from some of the back markers who, by this point in the season, had started to get out of our way. You know, once we'd actually won an outright race, some of the slower cars were really thinking, oh, actually, no, that's that Caterham, we'll just get out of his way, which makes a big difference. Traffic in the Caterham is a real problem, because like the Clio from Rockingham, we're actually not quicker at the end of the straights than some of the mid-pack cars.
Yeah, so that just adds to the challenge. Do you find that because you're racing against cars that are quicker in a straight line, does it kind of lead to taking bigger risks in certain places?
Well, that was a very well-timed question. Yeah, this wasn't ever supposed to happen. I think our brakes weren't quite up to temperature. Obviously, it's the car's fault. No, I just went in too deep. I got overexcited and I missed the braking zone. And thank God, Simon. I thank you very much for that. If you ever watch this video, that would have been both of us out of the race. So biggest cock up of the year for me.
But you got away with it, so that was good news. When did you discover about that moment, Ben? Presumably you had no idea when you were watching from the pit wall.
I was warned before I watched the video. I was also told to go and shake Simon's hand at the end, not knowing why, then watched the video and realised why. Yeah, I mean, we all make mistakes. There is a small issue with this car. We lock the fronts very, very easily. It's something we're addressing in the current off-season. But yeah, easy mistake to make. Really happy with the outcome, because it could have been very, very bad. I think would have taken out, well, like I say, both our cars, and I think that would have been our season over, to be honest.
There are pros and cons to having cameras on your car, Callum, aren't there? You don't get away with anything when you've got cameras on your car.
No, you don't, do you? No.
But it's worth it in the long term to be able to see all this come back again.
Oh, it's great. I spent hours and hours and hours pouring through all this footage, and I know that Ben thinks I'm mad for the amount of time I spend doing this, but I really enjoy it. I think it's great, and ultimately, I want to have all this, so in 30, 40 years' time, when I've forgotten that I ever went motor racing, I can look back at it and go, oh yeah, that was brilliant.
Once again, you and Simon Clark were pretty close, but you were beginning to have some other problems.
Yeah, okay, so this was our season-long issue. It turned out to be a head gasket, which is not at all uncommon for a K-Series engine. But at this point, we've pressurised the cooling system, and it's just pummeling water straight out of the top of the header tank, which also went all over the rear tyres, and we were losing grip periodically and visibility, and the temperature was climbing, as you can see now, by the dial in the middle of the dashboard, starting to aim the wrong way.
So not ideal situation. The race, there was still a long way to go in this race as well. So how nervous were you at this point that you just simply weren't going to get a finish?
Extremely. In fact, to be honest, I'm really pleased at the moment. I hadn't fully noticed that at this point that we had a problem, which gave me a chance to be this close to Simon, or I would have backed off already. Yeah, I mean, we were very lucky, I think, to finish this race another few laps, and I don't think we would have.
So the battle continued. It was all still pretty fraught, and Simon there just getting a little bit sideways out of the S's. That gave you a great opportunity to dive down the inside into the bomb hole. That was a lovely move, and as you say, probably just as well you didn't know that the engine was getting a little bit hot at that point. Otherwise you might have been using less revs and not have been able to quite make the move through Coram. Again, that great speed that you've got through there with this car really helping you out. So again, you guys were running up near the front looking for a top result, but this was becoming a little bit more of a concern. Presumably, Ben, you didn't know anything about this until you were due to be in the car yourself.
No, I hadn't got a clue at this point. I saw there was a little fluctuation in pace every now and again, which for Callum is rare because he's very consistent, and so I had my suspicions, but no, I had no idea, and I believe I'm now about to be told. Yeah, I could see that the car was covered in coolant. Callum told me all about the situation,
And you went out a bit quick too.
Oh yes, I know that. In the miscommunication of trying to tell me what was going on and the rest of it, between us and the pit crew, we got it totally wrong. I think I went out a whole minute early or something terrible like that. So got the drive through, then served that penalty and got back out there. Hadn't got a clue where I was at this point, and was trying to nurse an issue. So it was just a case of bring it home at this point, Ben. And I was extremely worried about the work that was yet to come on the engine. This really was the problem, the start of the problem that we never quite solved. But no, it was nice home track, having a drive around and going through the traffic. I still enjoyed myself, as I did with all the races this year. But when you're in an ailing, a broken car, it's just not as much fun. You have to monitor yourself the whole time. And I pretty much drove with one eye on the temperature gauge the whole time, and it's not so much fun.
No, but you still racked up some useful points from this one, despite those problems.
Yeah, well, we tried to finish everything we started after the first round. We knew we didn't have a drop score, so it was just trying to get it back to the finish, and the damage was already done with the temperature at this point.
But third overall, second in Class A, they were really valuable points. You were still scoring points even when you were having problems. And in many ways, that's one of the tricks to the trade, isn't it, to be there at the end of the season. So from Snetterton, it was on to another tremendous circuit, the Brands Hatch Grand Prix track. And Callum, you were thoroughly enjoying yourself out there.
Oh, I loved this lap. Ben did a fantastic job in getting our engine fixed, at least temporarily, just in time for this race, to the point where on Thursday afternoon we still weren't sure if we were going to be in the paddock on Friday evening, so it was mega to be there. And after a few laps just running the engine in and just being careful with it, we got to the end of the season. We'd both had a couple of goes in qualifying, and I hadn't really had a chance to do a fast lap, and Ben jumped out saying it's fantastic. Go and have a go and set a lap. Ben was already on pole by this point, I'd hasten to add, and I think this was my favourite lap ever around Brands GP. It's just wonderful. I just seemed to get it all right.
Was it one of the best laps of the whole season, all the circuits?
I think probably from accuracy. I mean, this lap and my lap at Rockingham, I struggled to fault. I mean, obviously a professional racing driver would make me look completely stupid, but for me, I feel like I really nailed everything that I set out to, and scared myself in a couple of places and made it pay off. So I was very pleased with this.
Which part of the Grand Prix track is your favourite?
Oh, this bit through Dingledale and up into Sheen, it's just lovely. The blind entry here is great. It's just turn in, and I actually missed it that time, but so it wasn't perfect, obviously. But it's great turning in through there.
And then through the little bit of camber, positive camber that helps you through Stirlings and down towards Clearways and through the final right-hander. So this was an absolutely mega lap, and it gave you guys pole position, your first pole position of the season, second front row start of the year. That must have been something to be proud of.
Oh, it was lovely, and the gap that we had back to the next car. I mean, Simon was on second next to us and some 9/10 behind us. Wonderful. So we were really hoping for the best in this race, and Ben took the start.
Always nice to start from pole, Ben.
Yeah, it sure is. And from the back of the trailer, unproven, straight on to pole position, I was very happy with the guys at Full Circle had helped us out to get us to this point. Had a terrible start, and because the thing's off camber at that that part of the track, I dug in and the back end moved round and didn't get a very good launch. We were very worried about the rain at this point. As you can see, there's a few drops of water on the lenses, and it was just a case of settle into it and see what goes from there. But this turned out to be a very eventful race.
Well, the red flag came out early on, didn't it, because of an accident down at the first corner, so you guys all had to slow it down and wait for the race to be restarted once again. But in that pause, before it was restarted, down came the rain. Now, just explain where the pros and cons are when it starts to rain for you guys.
We're so light, we basically skim across the surface, so there's nothing to bite into the tarmac. And I've done very little wet work in this car, so it was very, very exciting. I didn't know what I was getting into. Simon very nearly overtook us before the line there. That's why he backed off, and as it turns out, that was the only reason why he didn't get past us. I didn't quite have my technique of safety car restarts dialed in, as it's the first one I've ever done. I tried to remember what I'd seen on Formula 1 and go through it from there.
How greasy was it?
You're about to see the back end go everywhere. Online, it was just like sheet ice. There was no way I could get the power down. And you'll watch the green Seat now, front wheel drive, plenty of downforce come through and make a mockery of all of us, really.
Yeah, but look at this up the inside. He makes a bit of a touch, doesn't it? Could have gone wrong for Darren there.
It really could have. I didn't actually realise how close that was. I think he was carrying a lot more pace than he realised and sort of run out of room, didn't he? But as it started to dry out, we got quicker and quicker. But there was the first, I think, about 4 to 5 laps where it was still very greasy, especially in this run up here to the top of the hill. And before you go back off into the GP circuit, it was extremely slippery.
So challenging conditions, but a bit of sunshine, a bit of broken cloud, thankfully, which certainly gave you guys a little bit more hope for later in the race. But Darren Goes in the Seat was making his way through, despite that little incident that he'd had going out onto the Grand Prix circuit. He was now the one bearing down on you guys, and it was always going to be tough to beat him there.
Well, it was, although I thought we really would have the pace to do it. But, I mean, as you see here, the straight line deficit from Darren to us, particularly on the slippery circuit, was just gross. And there was nothing that Ben would have been able to do about this. He came from absolutely nowhere. And, a corner later, you can see that Ben's got so much more pace than he has here. It's just, unfortunately, that straight was too long.
So Darren got in front.
I have a confession. I slipped a gear going up the hill, to be honest. But yeah, it was a case of trying to keep the thing on the track, and other bits were missed. But once it started to dry out, I realised that we could go after Darren, and I think if I remember rightly, I do stick with him for a number of laps now. But then the instant field race continues, and we have a few situations that are just totally out of our control, as it was for the rest of the field, and Darren had an extraordinary tactical advantage, but you'll see that unravel in a minute.
Yeah, well, you were obviously driving pretty hard here. You can see how much the car was sliding through Clearways as you were still trying to stay in touch with the Seat, but he was just edging away bit by bit. He just had that little bit more pace again, really trying hard, attacking through paddock, but it was drying up a little bit. It was giving you a chance just to start pulling back some of that gap as you were approaching the pit stops. So this was an exciting time for you to know that you were going to have a chance.
Yeah, to keep trying to find that grip. Yeah, I was doing all sorts of weird stuff trying to search for it, especially when it was much wetter. But as it returned to dry, I felt the car come back to life again. Felt the tyres switch on, and I knew we could go back at him. And this is the track that I did my very first race at, and so weirdly, it's the one I have my most experience on, and I love it. It's one of the best tracks in the UK, and I love this back section where you can flow from one to another, and for our car it's great as well because you need to maintain mid-corner speed, and that's what it loves to do.
Well, this was going beautifully well through Hawthorns and then through Westfield. The car beautifully balanced and giving you guys another chance to try and perhaps take another victory. Did you think that another victory was on the cards at this point, Callum?
Very much so, although I didn't know that this was about to happen. As Ben came up against the back markers, it all very nearly ended for us very, very quickly. Yeah, no, I was itching to get back out at Darren. The thing is, it was very complicated because when we were in the pits, because of the accident at turn 1, they shortened the race by 15 minutes, and none of us had been told that. It kind of just loosely went down the pit lane that suddenly the pit window was open. So we had to make some quick calculations to change how soon we brought Ben in. And so you know, we went again for the halfway point in the race, as we do, to keep it as fair as we can between us. Ben doing a great job picking his way through traffic here, and Darren didn't. Darren just stayed out and stayed out and stayed out.
Yeah, well, that's his prerogative, I guess. Being a one-man band, it's a slightly different situation for him. He can time his pit stops and think about situations that might occur in the race, which indeed did occur ultimately, as we shall see. But at this point, he still just had that very slight advantage over you guys, as Ben was the first of the two battling for the lead to come into the pits and make that pit stop. So you obviously felt a bit of pressure on here.
Yeah, I know I had to hit it as hard as I could, as fast as I could, try and deal with the traffic. And really, I was just looking for the next pit exit. I assumed I would see Darren come piling out of the pit lane here, turned into paddock, no sign of him up the hill. Again, another lap. I thought he must be out this time, and still no sign of Darren. The problem with that was that towards the end of this lap, a Porsche managed to come off here at Sheen Curve and hit the barrier on the right hand side, which forced a safety car, and it was exactly now that Darren was going into the pit lane, which of course meant that the safety car had no leader to pick up. So as the first placed car on the road, he picked us up, which unfortunately gave Darren an entire lap's advantage.
So he joined to the very back of the queue, but he was, as you say, nearly a lap ahead. So really no chance for you to beat him on the restart, sadly, but and especially with only 2 laps to go to the end as well.
Oh, it was a fun sprint, and I enjoyed this. It's my first ever safety car restart. That Saxo is unbelievably fast in a straight line, as is the Porsche behind it, so I knew we had to try and get a little bit of a gap. I had to come into clearways at full pelt just to bridge that gap a tiny bit, and fortunately it worked out just right. I had a little gap, and we were able to keep it for the remaining 2 laps. We extended it slightly, but not massively.
But there was nothing you could do about Darren, who was, as you say, nearly certainly 3/4 of a lap ahead down at the back of the queue. A bit of argument about it afterwards, was there, from everybody, or was it all okay?
Oh no, there wasn't argument from it. I have to say, I was a bit hot-headed. I was really itching to take it to Darren and go and have a good fight with him for the race win. The reality is, we did win the race. We won our class. Darren's not in our class. He's a Class S car. So although my pulse was raised when we got to the end, there wasn't any arguing amongst ourselves or opponents. That's the one thing that's so lovely about this championship, is we all play together. This was odd though. I've cut it from the footage, but the brands released all the safety vehicles out in front of the whole queue of cars coming over the line.
Very strange. But you got your class victory, which, as you say, was the big target. However, class victory wasn't the only thing on the cards at that point, because you were now within touching distance of the overall championship. Yeah, you needed a bit of luck, but it was a possibility.
It was barely a possibility. We weren't expecting anything coming into Alton Park. It was, no, it was close, but we put ourselves in a position where it was still possible.
But it wasn't straightforward, Ben, because the cooling problem still hadn't been resolved.
After our patch-up fix as such, we basically rebuilt the head and put it back on. It had fundamental issues lower down that we didn't deal with, and it hadn't lasted very long. So we figured out about halfway through qualifying that we'd got exactly the same issue, and that we were going to have to nurse the thing home. I absolutely love this track. I hadn't raced here before. I did an awful lot of work on the sim, and my qualifying lap was just the best fun. And it was my last lap before we had the problems to deal with. So after this, I backed off, and it became quite a frustrating drive. One of the most difficult drives of my life, but also one of the most rewarding. I think we had the pace here to take the A-class win. If nobody had had any problems, I think it would have been a really tough battle. But as things worked out, you know, it was all meant to be.
Which corners did you find sort of maybe more different than you expected from the sim, or was it all really pretty much similar?
This particular track has been laser mapped, and so a lot of the bumps are exactly the same. All the cambers are very, very close. I'd say this area is probably one of the I suppose in real life you don't take the risk you necessarily would in virtual world, so you do approach it differently. The rest of the track, however, it feels almost identical.
Oh, fantastic. And it was a really, really good lap once again for you guys, because it's a track that has some big, long straights, but you were the fastest Class A car. You were 4th fastest overall, so an absolutely brilliant way to get the final race underway. But Darren Goes was still the favourite to win the championship. He would be starting from 3rd place. And Callum, you got the start.
I did, and actually, do you know what? This really worked. I started the race very, very cautiously, so I gave the start 95% and got fantastic launch. We jumped both of the Beamers in front of us. Now, these are both S-Class cars. I knew we didn't have to fight them, so I didn't turn in on the white one, and there was nothing I could do about the grey one. So at this point, I was purely thinking damage limitations. We were very lucky that our main rival, Simon, for Class S, unfortunately had a differential failure. Turned out to be in the end, so he never took the race start.
So going into the race, you were pretty confident that Class A was yours, as long as what would have happened if the engine had given up on you?
Oh well, we would have finished second to Simon, so we had to get to the end, and at the moment we had to finish 13th to win Class A.
So it was still pretty nerve-wracking, but at this point you were ahead of Darren Goes. Darren Goes, though, had plenty in hand at this stage in terms of the overall championship. So everybody had their own kind of mindset, didn't they, Ben? I mean, it wasn't just a sort of flat-out race. You guys were thinking about engines. He was thinking about trying to stay safe and just finish the race. It's always slightly more complicated when there is a championship at stake.
Yeah, everybody was pressurised, so everything was very. Yeah, it was like I say, the hardest race I did this year at the slowest pace. I think in the race we were around about 2.5 seconds a lap off our qualifying pace, which compared to other races is a mile off. But it was such a pressurised day. It was very odd, the whole incident with Simon and him not being involved, because I think if he was at full strength we would have not stood a chance, not even for the A class. But we knew the A-class victory was on as long as we could get it to the end, and that was the task. The problem, however, was difficult to drive around, because if you drove too slow, it would overheat. If you kept the thing going and kept it revving, it would cool itself down. So I believe there was still a bit of coolant going round and round, but there was nothing in the header tank. So if you didn't keep it moving, it would get very hot. So it became a different sort of exercise for sure.
Callum, you were looking after the car in this first stint. It's funny, isn't it? I mean, you had a few good races with Darren through the year. Not every track you were able to match him, but when you look back now with what happened, it's fun to see that those battles happened.
Oh yeah, no, it's been brilliant. Darren's been a great guy to race against. You know, in this particular scenario, we didn't have to race against him. I wasn't going to be able to defend against him here anyway, but particularly not at 80% pace.
Not to mention Darren at this track from about lap 5 was unstoppable. He set lap time after lap time, you know, his personal best and fastest laps of the race, and I don't know what got into him. He was just untouchable for about 10 laps of this race.
But how much were you looking at the temperature gauge throughout all of this?
Quite a lot, and it wasn't long before the coolant problem came back. At this point, you know, there were no spots. The temperature was fine. I was chasing this Beamer. I have to say, I mean, if we were running full pelt, I could have stayed behind this guy the whole race long. I don't think I'd have ever passed him, because it's just too difficult here to get a run and stay ahead. But I certainly could have stayed in this position. Unfortunately, a few laps in, that happened, and you know the cooling system had obviously come back to being a problem.
And at this point, you must have been really worried. Was the car going to finish? Were you going to end up with an A-class victory, let alone anything else?
Yeah, well, we weren't sure. Again, you know, all I knew at this point was that the problem had reoccurred. The car had to finish. I was short shifting all over the place. Cost us a lot of time, and we ended up falling back into this BMW. But this guy's been known to be a little bit reckless over the course of the season. So again, as a Class S car that I didn't have to finish ahead of, I pulled right out of his way once he got close enough and just let him breeze on by.
Well, sensible thinking. You had to look after your car. You had to protect it with that coolant again causing a problem. Ben, at this point, of course, you were getting ready to take over for the final stint of the year.
Yeah, I knew my job would be get it home rather than be quick. I wasn't aware at this point that it'd let go again. I had assumed as much, to be honest. The engine causes so much problems that I knew that this was its last race, full stop. So it was just a case of whatever we could do to get it back. The pit stop, however, I'm so proud of my team for this one. It was high pressured. There was a lot going on, but everybody knew their role and we all got it right. And I left the pits feeling extremely confident that the people around me were doing the best job they possibly could.
And was it one of your best pit stops in terms of matching, hitting the time that you needed to hit?
Yeah, I believe we were within a second, so it was one of our absolute best. But we wanted to be safe with that one.
Yeah.
I was told by Darren actually after the season had finished that we were the most consistent pit stoppers throughout the entire season.
That's great stuff, isn't it? But this is crucial. Darren's just gone off. Now, that's where suddenly everything changes for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely right. And we didn't. It took us a couple of laps to notice that Darren hadn't come past us. I mean, Ben, did you see him on that lap?
No, not on that lap. I don't think so. He was sitting there in the marshal's post, and that was when I first noticed. Almost thought about giving him a wave, but I thought I'd be rubbing it in. It was at this point where I was like, well, do I need another position? Do I need an extra point? Is it possible that we're on for the overall? And so I started to pick up the pace, and then I realised then the temperature was going up and I had to bring it back down, and then trying to find somewhere in between to bring it home and to be reasonably quick was now my challenge. I think you'll see I start to go back at the BMW that overtook us before, and was probably not saving the car quite as much as what Callum was, hence my pace was a little bit better. But yeah, I think that added enthusiasm for a possible overall was egging me along. And actually, although the temperature was an issue, it was an irregular issue. Once or twice a lap, up and down the hills, it really seemed to struggle. So the more I backed off, the worse it got. So I tried to find a level with it.
But it was all looking pretty good. A lap to go. Callum, you were getting pretty excited in the pits.
Oh, I had no nails left. It was excruciating, lap after lap, and I started counting Ben down the laps from the time, and then I realised I'd got that wrong, and I was going to have to tell him that he had to do another lap, and it was just driving me nuts, to be honest. I was beside myself. On the TSL telemetry, just watching his little marker just move round and round and round.
But this was it. This was coming up to the final lap. He had the BMW in front. He was battling. This could have been for a podium finish. You didn't need the podium finish, but you didn't really know exactly what you needed.
Well, no, and we had no way of telling Ben that he didn't have to go after this BMW. So, fortunately, Ben's got a very sensible head on his shoulders. He didn't do anything ridiculous. He didn't need to, and we came home fourth overall.
Fantastic. Fourth place across the line. First in Class A, and it was the overall win in the TrackDay Championship, snatching it away in the final race of the season. And what a feeling that must have been. And this was the moment coming up when Ben discovered that they had indeed achieved all of their targets.
That was exciting. Yeah, just about finished. Amazing. Have we done it? I just won the championship.
Frugal Racing, the 2017 MSVR TrackDay champions, and they'll be back for more in 2018.
Well, Callum and Ben, you streaks of white-hot lightning. Congratulations to you and the Frugal Racing team on winning the TrackDay Championship overall. Yes, overall, through pure greed and speed. You're not just first class A, you won the whole flipping shebang.
Yeah, great stuff. Congratulations, guys. Overcoming engine problems earlier in the year, taking the overall race win in Rockingham. Yeah, Uncle Ben's very, very proud of you, as is Uncle David and Uncle Steve. It's not really Uncle Ben, actually. It's Daddy Ben,
That's a type
isn't it?
of rice.
Yeah,
which is delicious. You should celebrate.
Anyway.
Eat some Uncle Ben's rice.
Well done, boys.
Cheers, boys.
So I'm here with Ben Simons, Callum McDougall's partner in crime and championship winners at the as part of the TrackDay Championship. I'm going to ask you a few questions about your season. Hope that's okay.
It's no problem.
How has the 2017 MSVT TrackDay Championship season turned out for you? Obviously, you've won it.
It's been beyond
nutshell.
all expectations. We came into the season hoping to get the car competitive.
Yeah.
That was the main aim. We weren't initially, and we had a lot of reliability issues. We then worked pretty hard to get up to pace, and then miraculously from that point we've just had result after result, and it's been an absolute dream, to be honest.
No, I can imagine.
Well, quite well, thanks. Yeah, it's been a difficult season. We've had quite a lot of issues over the course of it, but it's been really good fun. We've had some really close racing throughout the season.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, we put ourselves in a position in the last round where we could get lucky, and we got lucky. So yeah, very happy to be standing here as the TDC winner.
Great. And every year in motorsport is seen as a learning curve. What was the most important thing that you've learned this season?
Managing expectations of each other, I believe.
Okay.
If I had to pick one thing, it would probably be teamwork.
It's something that I've never done. I've never worked with another driver before, and because it's a family thing, you know,
Yeah.
with the wives, etc., etc.
Yeah.
It's taken most of the season to get to a point where we all know our roles and we all know what to expect from each other.
And we've come on a long way, and you know, getting to the last round, we've seemed to have a relatively slick operation.
It nearly brought a tear to my eye. I was so proud of my little crew. Everybody knew their marks, and it was incredible. So I think that's been the biggest learning curve this year, other than obviously, you know, driving techniques is a continual learning thing. But that's been the standout point, I believe.
And team effort all round.
For sure.
Team effort all round. Okay, so what has been your best race and why? Would it be that one or?
It would be Rockingham.
Yeah.
Rockingham, we won overall outright on pace.
Well, best race would have to be Rockingham, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a track that suits us.
It was great to be able to turn up to track that I'd never been around before.
Oh, really?
We had a very disrupted test session.
Yeah.
I think I got about 5 laps in. Stuck it on pole and won. It was
Nice,
don't get much better than that.
Yeah, cool.
As a caterer, we have a not great straight line speed, which is ironic considering Rockingham has the fastest overall straight.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of tight twists and turns throughout Rockingham's infield. And the caterer is very good at changing direction and being late on the brakes and quick at slow corners. So we were really able to capitalise on that. And a half an hour into the race, the three of us who went at it for the championship were nose to tail for the first half an hour. Brilliant fun. Brilliant fun.
And that was our first overall victory. So I think that one will go down as a bit of a nice memory
In the memory bank. Interesting question here. So, if money wasn't an object,
Right.
what car would you like to compete in? Obviously, you say you're competing in Caterham now.
Yeah.
But if money wasn't an object, would it still be a Caterham, or what sort of car would you like to in this championship in particular?
Oh, in this championship?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd have to comply to the championship regs of 225 per tonne.
Yeah, TrackDay Championship.
It probably would be a Caterham.
in this championship.
Yeah.
Crikey! Now there is a question.
And then I can tell you what Callum said after you've answered.
Really? All right,
If you want,
okay.
yeah.
I mean, overall, I'm a big GT car fan.
Yeah.
And that's something if money ever allowed, that would be what I'd like to do. In this championship, I would like to try something heavier, something a little bit more saloon car. I'd love to try a Beamer, something like that.
Yeah.
It was really fun this season, proving that a really small, not very powerful car can compete against really big boys like BMW M3s and Porsche Boxster. It's been great fun.
We have huge advantage in certain areas, and it'd be really nice to maybe take that away and work on other areas of driving. I'd say something like an M3.
Interesting. He said it'd stay in the Caterham.
I bet he did. He pretty much bleeds Caterham.
really great fun. So it probably would actually stay a Caterham, and it will do for next year.
So you'd stay put?
Yeah.
You'd stay put. I don't know whether that would have been his first answer, but at the moment I said this championship in particular, he said no, stay put.
I quite imagine. No, the Caterham has opened my eyes this year as well. It's my first year in a Caterham.
Yeah.
And they are incredible bits of kit.
Yeah.
They really are. And for the money wise, because obviously that is a worry, unfortunately. I don't think you go faster for cheaper.
And you get the pace, don't you?
There you go.
Yeah. So given what you know now about the sport, what advice would you give to someone new into this type of championship?
Do it. It's fantastic.
First thing I would say is to come and do it. If you have any inkling of going motor racing, come and do it. It's a great
Do this
series.
championship.
It's a great series.
It's amazing. It's like being alive again.
It's actually really affordable,
Yeah.
particularly if you're doing it with somebody else.
Those horrible winter nights when you don't really want to be at work anymore, you think, next season, don't worry, and it gives you something to aim for.
There's a lot of competition up and down the field, whether you've got a really slow car or a really fast car. There's people to race with, and everybody's really nice and friendly. So
And the sort of family, everybody's included kind of vibe of this particular championship is a standout point.
Yeah.
It's
So you look forward to the weekends?
everyone's included, and I look forward to the banter and the on-track action as well. It's
Great
an
stuff.
all-round package.
Good.
so
So have fun.
just come and get stuck
Have
in
fun
it, yeah, and
and
enjoy it. Yeah, enjoy it.
Great. Who do you think your closest competitor has been in this championship, and what might they say about you?
I think
question,
that would be Simon Clark in the Porsche.
Okay.
Well, that would have to be Simon Clark.
I think it's so we're probably a little bit wild and out there, to be honest.
I almost took him out here at Snetterton,
Oh, no.
and thanks to him, we didn't have a big accident.
Yeah.
Mostly because we have to do our overtaking mid-corner. We've got no chance on the straight, and because of that, we've got no chance under the braking either.
Yeah.
It's going to happen at completely random times.
You say thanks to him, he saved the situation.
He definitely saved that situation, yeah.
But he's such a good driver, and he's such a gentleman that he has. He's been very fair this year, and I hope he would say the same about us.
So finally, what are your plans for the 2018 season?
So we ruined our engine at the last round.
Yeah.
So we are currently building a new engine which is slightly bigger, and we're going to try and jump up into Class S. And we'd like to win the championship next year in the same Caterham on outright pace rather than through a luck of situation.
The thing that I'm aiming for next year is to be outright winning the thing on pace. But the look for S-Class next year is just much more competitive, which is also a big must because we want the challenge really.
We'd like to take a few more outright wins if we can. So that's our plan. Back again.
Stay
defend
in
the
the
title.
season, defend the title.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Looking forward to trying it all again.
Great stuff. Well, thank you for your time, Ben.
No
And
problem.
Good luck for next season.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you for your time, Callum.
No, very well.
Pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thanks
And
a
you.
lot.